The podcast has begun. We are
22.
That's right, whatever he said.
And, as you can tell, we're in person.
We are in person, yeah.
Kind of weird.
Yep. I didn't magically green screen myself in. I'm actually here. Yes, touch things. Touching. Touching.
Poke your eye out.
Have each other's eyes. This is why we don't record in person normally, because we would be aggressive.
It really hurts.
Pain of friendship.
Yes. So, we just decided, why not do one in person? Yeah. Brandon was actually the impetus of that.
Was that?
Yeah, you were.
Oh, okay.
You kept bugging me every week. So in order to stop being bugged, I came down here. No, I'm just kidding. No one wants to go up into Priest River. That's just the no man's land.
It's an hour away. I mean, driving.
Yeah, who wants to do that?
Yeah.
So
apparently you today, to me.
I'm used to it at this point.
Yeah.
It's like anytime I want to do something, an hour and a half minimum. So
yeah.
I'm like, I have a backlog of good podcasts to listen to. So that's what this podcast stemmed from. I just wanted to provide that community service to other people driving an hour and a half.
You just wanted to listen to yourself talk for an hour while you did long drives.
Yeah. Running out of stuff to listen to, dude. Gotta start
creating my own content.
Mm-hmm. That's the best way to do it, I think.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's funny.
Isn't that what the advice they always give to writers? Like make what you want to read or something?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so at this point.
Just speak what I want to listen to.
Yeah, sometimes when I'm editing the podcast, actually, I kind of get lost in it. I was like, ooh, that was interesting. Where was that going? And I don't even want to turn it off.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I am an interesting person. You know what? I do have insightful things to say every once in a while.
Or you're so off the rails, you're like, where was I going with that? And that's what keeps you hooked. So,
am I going to come back around? What was I talking about?
Yeah.
Oh.
Can you really say stuff like that? That's weird.
Oh, man. Yeah.
It's like a really big reality check.
Oh.
Of who you really are.
Oh, gosh.
I think everybody should have a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like self-therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of someone else judging your thoughts, you get to judge your own thoughts.
Yeah. You just create a little prompt for yourself, talk for a while, and then you listen back to it later, and it's almost like a therapist asking you questions, and it's like, wow, is that really what I believe about that?
Yeah.
Gosh, I'm horrible.
You have to see it from this outside observer's perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So now that we're done being inspired.
Now that we've dug into our true motives deep inside ourselves, what are we inspired by right now, aside from us?
Yeah, I was about to say, don't say you. I don't know. Should I go first?
Yeah, you go first, man.
All right. This is a bit off the cuff, so I haven't had I would say I haven't had a lot of time to think about it, but I've had
We've just been thinking about being together.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, so what we're talking about.
For me, I want to talk about what is what is meaningful in not only a story, but just like a creative work or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's like what makes something meaningful versus just, I don't want to say dribble, but just like if you turn something up that's soulless, it's like what's the difference between that and something that really has like deep meaning that like resonates with you?
That's a good question. How do we know if our podcast we're making has a soul or is just drivel?
That's exactly what I was asking.
How do we know? Dang. Well, we better fit within that we better qualify that in such a way that we fit within this box.
Say something profound right now.
Yes. The drivel is without, but within there is no drivel. Yes, this is what this means. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know because I think about it because as I'm writing with AI more.
Mm-hmm. There's the AI plug for the week.
Couldn't get around it. Yeah, I made it 45 seconds at least. It's like it spits out all this stuff for you, which is cool. And it's like, I mean, that's half of what I do when I write anyway. Like without AI, is I'm just like filling in words to get to my next idea. A lot of times, like not every single word is inspired. I would say when I write, or probably when most people write, and so like you have maybe like these big moments of inspiration or different chunks of like an idea that are like, ooh, this is cool, and then you're like trying to stitch them together a lot of times, at least for me. And in that scenario, it's like, well, okay, so is that stitching? Like, does that have any meaning outside of just like connecting interesting ideas or different concepts? I don't know. Like, is every word of Tolkien inspired? Or like, there's obviously like passages people will never remember from that book just because there's so many words and so many phrases. But yeah, I don't know. Or maybe people would argue everything he did right was inspired. I'm not sure.
Well, okay, so can you think of, so you're talking about good creative works where it's a good story with just moments of drivel within it. But can you think of anything that you're like, when I read that book or when I watched that movie, it was like complete drivel. They had no soul.
Yeah. Star Wars.
The new Star Wars movies.
Yeah. Some of the new Marvel movies.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some Disney movies like that.
Okay.
But
and then what are the things that did have soul?
I could think of 1,000 things that have soul, but I don't know, stuff like I even think of stuff like The Matrix, like 2 and 3 specifically.
Oh, really?
Yeah, where people like hated on it and didn't like it, but it really had its own identity. Like, there's not really like anything out there that like turns into a kung fu philosophy science fiction movie.
Well, yeah, that's true.
It's like, how many like movies are you gonna get like a guy fighting a clone of like 1,000 different like programs while someone's giving him a moral lesson about the ethics of free will?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know, just a weird combo of things.
Yeah,
so like it had its own identity, even if it was like not quote unquote good or whatever. It's like, I don't know, to me that's like still inspired, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it has. So maybe it's something that's very original, unique, something that I don't know. Maybe it's not like when I think of the new Star Wars movies, I feel like they put it through the conveyor belt and just spit it out of the factory, and we're like, this is statistically probably going to be good for us.
Yeah.
And it was like, did a human make this? Like, what actually happened here? Maybe AI would have made it better.
Probably, yeah.
If we were to run through here's all the Star Wars information, give us an episode 6, 7, and 8, AI would have made it better.
I think people are already doing that, yeah.
That's actually really sad to think
about. Yeah. Like, just play it safe and it's like, okay, we need this character, and this plot line, and we know it works, so let's do it again.
Yeah.
Definitely lacks soul. So, but yeah, I guess for me, like the main question I want to hit on is, so it's like people can kind of recognize like what's inspiring to them or like what's meaningful to them in a story, and it's like different for each person. But like, how do you know? Like, where does the meaning come from? I guess, is it the feeling it gives you? Is it the message that's like portrayed? And I guess maybe this depends on the person consuming it too. Is that how meaning is portrayed through that? Is it like by who receives it? I don't know.
Yeah, I think I would imagine there's at least two things I'm thinking of right off the bat. One is things feel meaningful in a story when it's relevant. Like it tells a story that I feel like I could be a character in the story. Like I could imagine myself being that person. Like I feel relatable in a certain way. Or when there's like a certain lesson that seems applicable to my life. I feel like when there's those types of elements, it easily makes the story really interesting. I don't think that all stories have to have those elements. Like I could be interested in a story about something that's completely irrelevant to me as a person, doesn't really have a life lesson applicable to me, but I feel like those are at least two things that typically interest me. If I find a story that's like, that's how I feel sometimes. I feel like okay.
So I'll have two follow-up questions with that.
Okay.
The first thing is that like you mentioned like two different types of things. Are those like feeling things? Like, because you said you resonate with the character. Is that like a feeling that you have, or like more of a thought side? And then also like if they have like a moral lesson, is that like a thought side or more of a feeling side?
I think it's both a thought side for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I think that there's, well, maybe relating to them is a little bit more feeling. I mean, I'm thinking of like Frodo's going to destroy the ring, and it's like, oh, he's got this really big task in front of him. Like, I have hard things I have to do in my life too. That like I don't look forward to those things. Oh,
Frodo can do it. I can do it.
Frodo can go to Mount Doom or Mordor and throw the ring in, and like I could do it too. So yeah, I think that sometimes that's how I view certain things. Mm-hmm. Like a common scenario in a lot of movies is the new rising hero learning something to save the world, and then the old sage who's like teaching them that. And I think a lot of people resonate with that story because it's like everybody's had a time in their life when they were young learning something new, and it was like, I'm the new person at job or school or whatever, and you're like the person trying to become something. And I feel like that's an easy identity capture for a lot of people,
Yeah, like a mentor comes along.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then the second question I kind of have with that is, so you have those things that are meaningful to you in a story, like how have you ever found like a story that is 100% that, or is it like you feel like there's a common amount of a story that's like very meaningful and resonates with you?
Like I remember there was a season of my life when I really liked watching The Secret Life of Walter Mitty because he was kind of this like awkward guy who's like, I don't know, I don't feel like I fit in, and he's sort of like doing his good job, but he kind of gets ignored. And he's like, this is definitely back when I was single too. Like he was like interested in this girl, but like he didn't know what to do with her, and how do I talk to her or whatever. And then he like goes on all these daring adventures, and then like totally gets all this confidence and gets out of his little like fear of life, and it's about overcoming like his interpersonal struggles and personal limitations and things.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a time when I first watched that movie and was like, that's me. It was like, I'm trying to go out with girls, but they don't like me, and I'm
not interesting enough.
I'm not interesting enough. I'm so boring and lame, and it was all this.
Never been to Iceland?
Yeah. I'd never jumped in freezing water out of a helicopter before and skateboarded down a volcano. Like, only I'd done those things, people would think I'm cool.
It's hopeless.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that one, on a large level, spoke to you, or was it resonated?
Yeah.
Interesting. Huh. Yeah, because like I guess. So for you, is it more of like the whole package then that gets like absorbed, or is it like on a moment by moment basis that we like finding meaning?
That's a good question.
Because I do think like the little pieces all add up to make something that's like can be very impactful. But like I don't know if that's every piece goes towards that, or if it's just like enough of the pieces go towards that, then you come out with something that's like profound.
I feel like there's more impact if I'm relating to the hero's journey, the main character's main thing that they're trying to figure out.
Like a theme or a through line.
Yeah, whatever the through line of the entire narrative is, that's kind of the main thing I want to relate to. I'm trying to think of if I've ever watched a movie where I really related to like a little offshoot scene or kind of side character as much. I don't know. I'm sure that I have, but it doesn't strike me as really memorable or as like, that's a good story because I related to this like side character.
Yeah.
I don't know, not that I can really think of.
So I guess maybe the meaning comes from just enough points that like, or enough, plot, or enough ideas that like all relate to the central theme, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting. I'm thinking a little bit about how, what makes something meaningful, and I'm thinking of looking at like the entire Bible. Like a lot of times when people look at the Bible, they think, oh, this is kind of a boring book. It's got like weird rules and genealogies and things like that, you know? And it's like, if you really sit down with it, there is like profound meaning, but a lot of people don't care about it. It's like the execution of it, because it's thousands of years later and different language and things like that. There's a lot of people where they like don't really want to cross that barrier. It's like there's a treasure trove of meaning here, but it's like too hard to get to it. I don't really care to like dive into all those details, you know? Yeah. Whereas for me, it's like I see that meaning and it's like worth it to like cross those hurdles and learn different linguistic things, because the meaning, like, ooh, I've captured it. Like, it's so rich. Like, I get really into it, you know?
Yeah.
But I wonder if sometimes in stories, it makes me think about how like sometimes meanings could get missed, you know? Or like sometimes there are different stories that I've read where the first time I've watched it, I think, whatever, like I didn't totally like that. And then the second time I come back and I'm like, man, that was profound. Mm-hmm. I think I felt that way when I watched La La Land for the first time. The first time I watched it, and I was like, well, that was just depressing. They just like didn't really, like they weren't together and it was sad and like whatever. And then the second time I watched it, I was like, oh, it's not really like a love story per se. It's kind of about like two people working hard to try to get something, and they finally got it. But in the real world, you can't always like get everything you want. Like you can't always like get your perfect love story and your like perfect career path. Like they kind of had to have sacrifices, you know? And,
yeah.
And then I thought it was like really beautiful, but I thought that the second time. I don't know. Do you think that there's any stories that you can think of where there's like layers of the meaning, and the first time you saw it or consumed it, it was like, I didn't appreciate all the meaning that was here.
Yeah, I think in those cases, a lot of times, like I'll watch a movie and then, like if it gnaws on me in some way afterwards, that usually means I missed meaning, like, in my experience. So like I'll watch it and then I keep thinking about it, and it's like, to me, that's the clear sign that like there was something there that wasn't like apparent on first viewing or whatever, and then I'll go back, and usually like it won't leave my mind, so then I'll just go back and watch it, and then I'll be like, oh, okay, like that was cool. Yeah, I feel like a movie kind of like that was Lucky Number 11.
Remind me what the premise of that movie was again. Just spoilers, ruin it for the people who are listening. I know that we've watched it together, but I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, it was basically like the guy.
Is that Kansas City Shuffle thing? Bruce Willis, yeah, and Morgan Freeman was in it. They kill Morgan Freeman in the end.
Yeah, he's like the crime boss.
Yeah, that's right.
And
yeah.
so,
Morgan Freeman was bad. Yeah, he's not all good people. Morgan Freeman could be people in this one.
Showing his true colors.
Not those colors. Crime lord killers.
Yes, exactly. Wow. Thank you. But yeah, I don't know, like that one just had a lot of. There's like, I mean, it happens more so with like stuff with religious connotations, especially. But with that movie, it was like everything about it was like dripping with meaning, kind of. Like even just like the way they dressed up their sets with like wallpaper that was like confusing, you know. And it was just like everything was designed to like hide the truth in plain sight, I guess. And so, like, you don't, on the first viewing, you never really understand that, you know, until like you get the twist at the end of like, oh, this guy isn't actually being beat up and like, you know, accosted. He's actually the one like orchestrating all this to like get closer to these people. But you know, you kind of like, because you only get that at the end, you miss out on a lot of the meeting during like the interactions, and like then when you see it with the new context going back through it, it's like, oh, okay, like all this stuff now makes sense. Where you see like, okay, this is why he acted this way in this situation. You know, it wasn't just him being stupid or dumb. Like he was actually like furthering his agenda in the story or whatever. So like that's kind of like one that's just more obvious because there is a big twist. But I think a lot of other stuff you can like watch it again and be like, I think even Avatar, like the Last Airbender.
Oh yeah.
Like that show, you want to rewatch that, you'll see like a lot of interesting themes that are like way deeper than just a kid's show. So,
I remember when I watched The Matrix. I think I watched it like 2 or 3 times, and I watched it with a new crowd and some people. I think it was the Namus actually, and
That must be a good time.
And then I think it was Rich. He was explaining to me. I don't know. We were just talking about the symbolism or meaning or something, and then he explained to me how in the world of computers, everything is based on ones and zeros. And so whenever they said that Neo was the one, they were saying that he was the number one out of all the zeros. And so that was like the positive on a computer format. And how his name is like Neo, it's just a rearrangement of the word one.
Yeah.
And suddenly I was like, oh my gosh, this movie is so deep, and I'd already watched it a few times. I just never picked up on that, It feels like, duh, it's obvious. But at the time, it was like, oh my gosh, that's so crazy.
Did they do that on purpose?
They snuck it, yeah. They do that did they purposely do that? It's like, yeah. Oh,
Yeah, exactly.
It made the movie like way more interesting to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's like, somebody putting that intention into that work, whereas like instead of just picking the name Bob, and being like, okay, I had to pick something. So I don't know, like I think and I think that's how you can get super profound works is when you get like the higher the level of intention at each step, I guess, is where like really profound work comes from. So like I think unfortunately then at that point you might only make like, if you wanted to make like the most profound book, you'd have to like spend your whole life on it essentially, I think, or like work of art or something. But I don't know that that's feasible or even healthy.
No.
For me, like, I guess kind of what I was thinking about today was like, would I rather have like one work that is so kind of like you were mentioning with like the through line or finding the theme of the thing. It's like, is my theme derived through one book or through multiple stories and like through lines from multiple stories? And so for me, I was kind of like seeing it like that, where it's like, okay, each story on its own might not be like the profound thing that I'm trying to do, but like when you see them all together and like kind of find the through line to all of them, that's kind of where like hopefully what leaves people walking away with the profound sense of like meaning, I guess. So
yeah, I'm trying to think of like one story that stretches across several episodes. Harry Potter, I'll do that one. There's like how many? There's like 7 books, 8 books.
There's 7 books.
7 books, 8 movies.
Yeah.
Like, is there a theme that goes across every single one of those stories?
Love Harry.
That's like I suppose it could be the idea that like I don't know, Harry Potter. He's like this. Like I don't know.
I'm pretty sure it's love, dude.
You think so?
I think it's love conquers all. I'm serious. I'm not even joking. Because that's how
it's like the love of his mom.
It's what
his
saves
parents,
him.
His friends.
Yeah, at the end when he's like in heaven or whatever, it's like his love that brings him back or something.
Oh yeah, that's right. There's like a weird scene where he like yeah. I forgot about that.
In the train, like the white train station or something.
Oh yeah.
It's like in limbo or heaven or whatever.
He's in the same place that Thanos was when he died and was with his daughter in the white place.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, and then like there's something, I don't know if he like loves Voldemort at the end, but I know he like sacrificed himself to like let himself die or something. Yeah, I don't know. It's a very like
That's right, because then he was the last Horcrux thing, or Horcrux, something. And then he like, if he dies, then that was like Voldemort then died.
Okay. And then they cheated and brought him back.
Yeah.
But, I mean, again, you got the Christ symbology, so you can't go wrong there, but it would have been more interesting, in my opinion, if they just killed him off permanently. Can't make a sequel if he's dead.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what she was thinking or not, but
Gladiator, that movie, was die at the end as a heroic savior of the world.
Yeah, pretty much all my stories taken the character. No, well, most of them.
Oh, okay. Plot. Oh,
It just ties everything up so neatly. Yeah.
And then he died, and then all the problems went away. You don't care about all the rest of the characters. The main o's dead. Story's over.
Yeah,
all right, pick up the next story.
Yeah, that's how every story for everybody ends. So I'll tell it. All right, you want to jump into anything on that note?
Yeah. Did we decide if our podcast has a soul? Did we have a soul? Is this a meaningful podcast?
Yeah.
I don't know. Gosh, I mean, we talk about inspiring things, so hopefully it's meaningful to someone.
Yeah, I mean, it's meaningful to me. So
yeah, it's meaningful to me too. So
that's probably enough.
It's meaningful because we decided it's meaningful. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. It's like if you're, how many does your thing have to be meaningful enough to a certain amount of people to be valid? I don't know. Like, is it just because I've always thought about that. It's like if I had just like one person that read my creative stuff and really liked it and spoke to them, like I think that would be enough.
Mm.
And like over time, I'm realizing that one person needs to be me first and foremost. But
gosh, yeah. Just make it so that you like it, and then find people like you.
Yeah,
and then give it to those people.
Haven't found them yet. I think they're pretty rare.
Yeah,
I think. I don't know. Still working on it. Keep trying to get Matt to start a Discord for writers.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I think that would be cool, man. Like having a Discord where like people, because it's just so much better than like other social media. You can, like interact in real time, share files easier and stuff. But it's what you want to do with his website, just with like an easier platform. Essentially, like you can really customize. So do it, man.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Yeah, what am I talking about today? I wanted to talk about mythology.
Nice.
Yeah, mythology. So kind of on the line of stories here again. But I find that mythology is interesting, and I'm still thinking about sort of the religious mythology from when I was in Belize, which represent, I think I'm wearing a Belizean shirt. There you go. There's one of the Belizean monuments just right there on my chest. I carry the mythology with me. And so like, okay, so ancient religious mythology, the origin story of the world, things like that. Different groups of people around the world had different ideas of it. Then you also come to mythology kind of in the way that J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis had sort of this view of mythology, and just talking about like the fairy tales and the myths and how important they were for creating cultures and societies. And you kind of have that thought continued again as my wife and I are going through the biblical psychology series from Jordan Peterson. And this was back in 2017. I don't know, it seems like maybe he's kind of changed his religious convictions since then and maybe converted to Christianity. I'm not entirely sure. But at the time, he seemed like he was an atheist and was portraying the biblical stories as being completely this mythology. But it was like, this is a really great myth that we all should learn because it has like psychological relevance, And it's just interesting because some ancient mythology, it seems as though it's kind of like a fairy tale. Like this is portrayed as a fictional story, as a myth. That's like, well, maybe it was true, maybe it wasn't. Maybe, Hansel and Gretel ran off in the forest and there was a witch and whatever. And I don't know how exactly the story goes, but something like that. But then you come across other mythology where it's like more of a religious mythology. It's like, ooh, we like believe in this myth. This is like a religious point of view of how the world was made. Like certain people believe in these origin stories, and
Buddha or something.
Yeah, well, I was thinking back to the Belize culture, like the mythology of their culture, But I think it's important to like define what is a myth, which a lot of people have tried to do, and I don't know. I'll just give a brief idea to that, and then I think second is that question of like, do we still create myths, or are myths only ancient things? I don't know, but. So defining a myth, it seems like a myth is something where you almost have to take a step of deciding if you want to believe that it was a real thing or not. Like when I hear the term myth, I think this is something that could be real or could not be real. Maybe the world was flat at one point. Maybe God made the universe, maybe he didn't. It's like something where there's like almost this aspect of like you have to have faith in the story. It's not just like this we know is fiction, this we know is someone's biography. It's like, I don't know if I believe that or not, And then the other thing is, can we still create a myth? I mean, could we still, like, we could definitely still create stories where it's like, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. This is my account of what happened. So decide if you want to believe in that or not.
You know what a cult is?
Yeah, that's what a cult is, right? Yeah. So, it's like, are we still making myths? And what is a myth? How do we identify myths? That's what I'm wrestling with right now. What do you think?
Well, about 1,000 things. So, I feel like I need to write some of that down just to like address so many different things.
Mm-hmm.
Oof. Well, first off, can I just tell you about a myth that I really like?
Yeah, you can.
Okay. So there's this myth about Abraham having an extra son, and he goes.
Isn't he called Ishmael?
Oh, I mean Noah. Sorry.
Oh no. Oh, yeah. Okay. Noah having 4 sons.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and so it's like one for each direction, north, south, east, west, or whatever.
Oh, that's interesting.
And this other son goes like off to the east, and then like finds Nimrod out in the east, and then basically like learns from him, but then like stops learning from him because Nimrod is like delving or like
delving too deep.
Yeah, kind
of the Balrog.
Kind of, yeah. He's like using divination, but like instead of using light, essentially he's using fire, which is like an interesting idea I've been thinking about for a while now, where it's like fire in symbolic terms is almost like a false light. Like, light is this pure thing, but fire is like this. It produces light. It's like it's kind of a light, but it's like a very consuming light, and that's like whereas like light from the sun like actually energizes plants, it like promotes life.
Yeah. Like
this other kind of light like consumes and like burns up.
True.
So I've been thinking a lot about that, but it was just like it was an interesting myth that I heard, and like it sparked a lot of creativity for me. I was like, that's interesting. But the way like that, like those myths play out, I think, is in a lot of ways, it kind of goes back to my, is Santa real, It's like, because he's kind of a myth, right? Like something people made up.
Yeah, right.
And if it's, and you could look at like, the creation story. Sorry, Dad. But one of our conversations that we often have is he talks about how, it's like, I think he has a big issue with like in Genesis when people are like, that never happened, or it was like just an allegory or something. And, to him, like the fact that it existed or like really happened in like a physical sense, the way it is described is like fundamental for him and very important. And, for me, like I tend to think like there's deeper levels of reality than just like a physical occurrence of something. And I don't know that there's like one's more important than the other, but like the fact that the story of creation could be describing an entire like almost metaphysical principle in a sense of like how, God, creates things on certain days and, brings together systems that like complement each other and promotes like this harmony and this synergy together. Like all these like really advanced concepts that are like almost laying out the fundamental nature of reality in a sense. It's like the physical stuff is just a manifestation of something way deeper and way more like profound in my mind. And I don't know if that's just a personality thing or not, but so for me, like that's what's really interesting is seeing these patterns that actually reality manifests through. So to me, like these patterns are like a higher up thing than the reality itself. Like the reality itself is just a consequence of these patterns that are, innate and enduring. And then reality like unfold, or like what we call reality or science or whatever these physical manifestations are, just outflow from that, you know. So they're not the cause of like these higher principles. It's these higher principles informing reality to lay out in a certain way. It's like how gravity, you know, is like this intangible force, or mathematics are these intangible forces, and yet the whole universe obeys these laws, you know, or like lays themselves out in a way that gravity makes sense. So it's like, you know, it's not that like the earth and the matter like informs gravity informs earth. And so like to me that makes it seem that there's higher like higher principles which are, you know, more important, I guess, for lack of a better word, than, you know, just the physical manifestation of something, I guess. And the ultimate at the top of all that is God, obviously, who informs all these different things. But yeah, so for me, when I see myth, I almost see it as more real than like physical, tangible things, because it's describing something that actually informs those physical, tangible things.
Yeah, you know, and you make a good point, and this is something I've struggled with too. So for the Paul's dad out there, who you know, just I'll give you the benefit of the doubt here. But anyway, the I've struggled a lot of times too when it comes to like certain stories, and you look at certain mythologies and you listen to that mythology and think, well, wait a minute, that couldn't have happened literally. That doesn't work with science, or it doesn't make sense logically, or things like that. And I think a lot of non-Christians read the book of Genesis and they're like, well, this doesn't work with my atheist, you know, scientific philosophies or beliefs or something like that. And so the literal aspect of the first book of Genesis becomes this like point of contention for the creationist and the non-creationist, and they have a difficult time with that.
Yeah.
I think I've always come from that point of view as well, that like I need to take Genesis 1 very literally, and this is exactly how it works. I think what I've wrestled with recently is I have been rereading Genesis 1 and learning the poetry of it, the symbolism of it.
Yeah.
And now wrestling with like, well, wait, is it just poetry and it's not literal? What does this mean? And then kind of thinking a third thought of like, or it could be poetic and it could also be like have a literal meaning to it at the same time, you know? I mean, I could recount the instances of my day that it's like, I worked out at the gym and I went to the grocery store and now I'm here with him and here we are seeing what's in store. You know, it's like, I mean, I could like say, it's like, yes, those are literally the things that I have done today. And I'm making it rhyme and be kind of this like artsy poetic form of describing what I'm doing. I look at the Bible and I see Genesis 1 and it's like, ooh, there's this like artistry to the way that they described it that's beautiful. Does that mean that it's only a poem, or does that mean that it's literal? And or maybe it's both of those things. And so then I go back to other, you know, I mean, obviously I believe in Genesis 1, but then if I look at like things that I don't necessarily believe in, so like the mythology of the Mayans, right? That was what I was talking about earlier. And they had this, you know, heaven, earth, hell, different layers of all of those kinds of things. It's like, do they literally think that there's layers to those things, or was that like some kind of poetry or symbolism of something? Maybe they didn't think that literally. Maybe they thought it was both literal and non-literal. It's interesting, you know. So it kind of makes me reapproach some of those older mythology ideas. Maybe wanting to give certain things more credit because I could view it as not being as literal. You know?
Yeah, I think you're on to it with the symbology thing. Like I think that's where it really is, because to me, again, like if that symbolic or that pattern layer is higher up than physical reality, to me it trumps reality in a lot of, or like when I say reality, I mean like the physical reality. Like to me, that symbolic thing trumps like physical material, just material things,
Tangible.
Yeah, tangible things for sure. And then, you know, because if you know the like the matter itself is informed by something higher, and so it's like matter itself isn't profound, right? Like it's the it's when it's informed and structured in such a way, according to these higher patterns, that matter becomes super profound.
Right.
So it's kind of like actually like we were talking about with the writing. It's like, well, why is writing? Two people could use the same words, or like but just like in a different conjunction, and one person writes nonsense, or two people could use the same letters, in two different works. One could be a jumble of nonsense and meaninglessness if they don't spell right, if they don't communicate, if they don't, have all the conditions, this higher pattern that they've applied to these random words or letters. And another person could apply all these letters correctly and piece things together and put them together in such a way that it's profound.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it's the same ingredients, it's the same matter, if you will, but just put together in a different way and informed differently by these higher patterns that aren't material.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that's what's to me really important about all this stuff. And so I think like those ancient Mayans and like people, whatever sages you want to call them, were like looking more at the patterns than like the actual structure of things. And I think like maybe like the lay people kind of picked up on the, I mean, lay people is a bad word, but I think like people who don't see the bigger picture get lost in the weeds of like, the whole creationism debate. Like I love that debate, to be honest, but like it's a fun topic of like whatever, but there is something that's like a bit higher than that, I think. And then when you see that, it's like, it doesn't really matter if it like happened or not, it's like, because like the really profound thing is like what it symbolizes and what like pattern is laid out there, and whether or not like it happened reality, like word for word, is like less important. Like it's still cool. It's still, I think, like valid for sure, but I don't know. I just see like a different level of meaning between those two things. And so, yeah, I don't know. For you, does it? I think because like so for someone like my dad, it makes it feel more like tangible, and maybe I'm just assuming on his part like there's a connection there, maybe, or a feeling. Do you feel like for you, if it's like something's real, like in the tangible sense, the material sense, that it's more like relatable for you or connectable?
No, well, I think that at one point in time I would have said yes to that, but I think now, I don't know, maybe as I'm becoming wiser or my brain is bigger, or I don't know what the connection is, but I definitely feel like I'm appreciating things that are non-tangible, just concepts of ideas. I can appreciate and spin around my brain and talk about a lot more. And now it's like, ooh, that's a cool idea, that's really cool. There's no way to touch that, feel that, see it, smell it, whatever, but that's a cool thing to think about, whatever that concept was,
Yeah.
So, I think that now I appreciate that more, and I can look at old, like, mythology, see the symbolism, and enjoy the symbolism, but yeah, it is kind of like a learned skill. I think it's sort of unnatural, to like get beyond the tangible.
Yeah,
it is kind of it's like an extra step from your brain to get outside of what I am experiencing in this moment to something that I am unable to experience this thing, and now I have to wrap my mind around this unexperienceable idea.
So I think in some ways, like symbols and patterns are more helpful for people because you see, because like especially if the material world is the result of these patterns, like I think it's like what trips people up a lot in the Bible. They'll see like this one-off event, and they'll be like, okay, so Abraham has to go sacrifice his son. Like, how do I apply that to my life? And it's like, if you're only applying it materially, you're like, well, I have to go kill my son with a dagger, and wait for a goat to show up. And it's like, okay, no, you're missing the whole point. Like, it's symbolic, like, what was the pattern here, like, that's showing, like, God essentially showing Abraham to, like, put his money where his mouth is and show, like, where he truly has his, like, trust and faith in. And so it's like, even that is a literal event, but we wouldn't ever take it literally, for our own lives. It's like the symbolic portion and like the pattern of reality that's like, orienting God as the highest thing in your life for trust, that's like the really profound thing. And so it's not the material thing that's profound.
Mm.
You know, if you could tell a fictional story that had that same message, and as long as you're getting the pattern from it, I would assume it's, you know, equally useful or like helpful. So I don't know. Like I think, you know, there's a lot of things like that where if you take if you take the pattern, it's like all these like seemingly random different events where people are like acting out these weird things.
Mm-hmm.
If you know the overarching thing or like pattern, then it starts to like all these separate events that don't seem related all of a sudden seem to start to like come together.
Mm.
And like that's kind of fun to see. Probably like you're talking about with the Bible, like where you, like the more you dive in and know like maybe the language or different things about it, like the whole story starts to make sense.
I think that's another interesting thing with mythology is when you go across the different mythologies of the world and see that they have something in common.
Yeah.
You see that they have like a 3-tiered system of like the heavens, the earth, and the sea, or something below. You see that it's like they all had a flood narrative. There was a lot of tree symbolism. Yeah, you know, there was like an original kind of man, woman, or there were people who got deceived at the beginning in some way. There's a lot of snake mythology.
Yeah.
There, you know, all kinds of things that it's like, everybody kind of tells a few of the same characters and events that happen. And then you hear that across all the myths, and it's like...
There's some like War of the Gods at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting. And like, it seems like those people are all picking up on these higher patterns that kind of like exist. You know, it's like, it's almost like a scientific method that's not science, where it's like, you know, every culture, I mean, or most cultures pick up on math, you know, for instance, and like, it's this abstract concept that doesn't really like, it manifests itself, but not in like a tangible way necessarily. Like you can't see 2 + 2, you know, it's like something you have to imagine. You know, and it could be the same way then for like spiritual concepts, where it's like there's these spiritual concepts that like dictate how the world lays itself out, and you know, but then you like need stories or something to like access it, like you would need numbers to access math, or like as a way of interpreting it.
Yeah. Do you feel like mythology is only an ancient thing, or is there like a current like myths that we have today that we could be creating myths? Or
Captain America,
that he's a myth,
right? Yeah, kind of, right? Like, isn't that what just Marvel movies and superheroes are?
Okay, okay, I could see it like that. Like what makes Captain America a myth in your mind?
It's basically, to me, I guess a myth is something that you would, like a story that you would tell to. Can I go on a little bit of a tangent?
Sure.
So, I've been like learning about veils recently.
Okay.
And you know, basically, there's this idea that, and like the Mother Mary, and you need kind of like, you need a space of mystery to bring forth the revelation. It's a whole like 2-hour side topic, but basically you need something mysterious to hold space for new ideas to come forth. And so, like I had this idea that basically there's like these principles that like these patterns that you have exist, and I was almost thinking like of story as like a cloth. So you have like this invisible principle, and then you have like a cloth, which is like a story, and you throw it over this invisible pattern or principle, like that's kind of an entity or something, and then like the cloth drapes over them, right? And so you get to see the outline of this thing that's under the cloth. It's like the cloth isn't the thing, but it like kind of almost hems in this invisible like entity or whatever, principle. And so I see like myth as like that story, which kind of like gives shape to these like deeper things that we like can't experience, because it's like it'd be like trying to like describe something, like it's trying to describe a 3D thing to a 2D object.
That's really interesting.
Have you ever seen like those like flat world type explanations on YouTube where they like try to show what like a 2D person would or a 2D being would see if like a 3D thing entered their space.
Maybe, I don't know.
Because like all they, it's like if you're a 2D like thing, you're on a plane,
Right.
and you have this like 3D object, you'd only see a slice of the 3D thing, like you'd just see a line. You'd never see, like if it was a sphere, you'd only see a line, and like as it's going through your plane, like it would get wider where the sphere gets wider, and then you would just see like a line that like shrinks or gets bigger,
Right.
You'd never see the 3D object, even though it's interacting with your space fully.
Mm.
And so like these patterns are like outside our dimension, obviously, but they're affecting it, and we can only see in the terms we can see it, with our experience. So like a myth is a way to kind of like try to capture a higher principle in a way we can understand it, essentially.
That was a great way of explaining that. That was interesting. Yeah, the veil.
Mm-hmm. So like the myth is the cloth, essentially, that like kind of brings body. It's not the thing, but it kind of encapsulates the thing in like a way that we can understand.
So we need the mystery.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Like yeah. And so that's what I think myth is. So in that essence, like Marvel movies or superhero movies are like I mean, they're essentially like old gods, right? Like you even have Thor. Like it's not even a stretch at that point, But you have, Spider-Man, which represents a certain set of ideals. He has. It's exactly what like an ancient Greek god is. It like embodies certain ideals. Like people know Spider-Man. They know what he would do, what he wouldn't do. It's like Santa, It's the same thing. It's a very like specific. Thing that so instead of having, the god of harvest 2,000 years ago, now you have the god of, helping people while being sassy while, swinging around New York. It's like, even as his own patron city, that he like existed. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's true. I know. Yeah, there is like a persona with them. And I know you could almost recreate the Greek god mythology through the Marvel mythology. Mm-hmm. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like, I mean, they treat like all these Marvel characters like the same way they would in like ancient, Homer stuff, where it's like, you always have like God showing up in other God stories, and like that's the crossover in comics, where like, ooh, Thor shows up in a Spider-Man comic, awesome, or whatever, like, or the team up between different gods, or there's a lot of like the same tropes and stuff that kind of come through. So.
Yeah, that's true. That is interesting. Huh.
And people, I think worship superheroes just as much as they do.
Yeah.
I mean, people have their little idols, their shrines with their like little figurines, and their like. I think actually hero worship, or like whatever god worship you want to call it, like is probably more alive today than it's been even in the past.
No, you've convinced me. Yeah, we can create mythology today. It's not an ancient thing.
No.
Make our own myths.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I mean, people, like, you see every, like, YouTuber now, and, like, they've got their little shrine behind them of things they're interested in, or, it's like, people are religious. Like, that doesn't go away. It just transfers forms. Mm-hmm. So, whether it's, like, your, Lord of the Rings book collection, that you display proudly, it's like, that's your little, it's all just shrines, which is, like, fine. I don't think it's inherently bad or anything, but like you're venerating certain objects and items and ideas.
Yeah, I burn incense at J.R.R. Tolkien's photo every night.
Thank you for your work.
The incense is tobacco.
Some old Toby.
Some old Toby. Yeah, I was watching a YouTube video of him the other day, a recording of him, where he was like, I can't do any writing unless I'm smoking, so I smoke quite a lot these days, yes. I was like, well, dude, got the black lung there.
Yeah. That is weird how, like, that's a topic for another time, but how substances are involved in creativity.
That's a whole nother topic. Yeah. That would be fun to get into sometime. Yeah. Because it can be inspired by substances.
Take some substances to do that one. I don't know.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I still don't know how I feel about that one. I have to think about it more.
Yeah, I know.
I'm pretty substance free these days.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Except for
interesting.
chili.
Yeah.
My substance of choice.
Oh, man. Gosh, well, okay, mythology. Yeah, that's interesting to unpack all of that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Hope that's not too much of an info dump for people.
That was a good info dump. That was really interesting. Yeah, I feel like that answered some of my questions that I had about it.
Nice.
That was cool.
Cool, man. Well, should we wrap it up here?
We should wrap it up.
All right.
Wrap it up like a burrito.
Okay.
Yeah, people. Mythology and meaning. How both those things work together or don't. I don't know.
I think we found some overlap there.
I think we found something that works with that.
I find a way to weave what I want to talk about into any topic.
I think the true secret is that the myth of AI has begun.
People will be worshiping AI in like a year.
Yeah, people probably already are.
Yeah. All right.
All right, people. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this, us being together in the same room as much as we did.
Yeah.
And
Try to make it maybe every couple months or something.
yeah, we'll try to make it happen more. We like it, even if you don't.
All right, see ya.